Okay, so I am going to go ahead and get started by just introducing myself. My name is Sarah Lenise. I work in the city clerk's office as a special projects coordinator. We do a lot of work up there with elections, some permitting, things like that. One of the other things that we offer to the community is Community Academy. It's usually like around an 8 to 9 week program where every Wednesday we go through and we meet different folks from different departments and they tell us all about their day-to-day operations. So I will be with y'all throughout the entire journey. If you have any questions, feel free to always reach out to me. Today we will be staying in viewer mode. Other panelists might ask us to all be panelists or whatever. It really depends on what like the presenter would like. And so for today, if you all have any questions or anything, please feel free to ask them, put them in the question and answer box. And then at whatever time, we will go ahead and go through those. I think usually Milton does a couple of different times throughout his presentation that he'll be like, who has questions? So we will get started then, and I'm gonna kick it on over to you, Milton.
Thanks, Sarah. Good evening. Welcome to Community Academy. Thank you for investing your personal time and to learn more about your government. It gives us an opportunity to engage with the people that we're here to serve and learn some things from you too along the way. Um, this is, I think, the third time I've done it. So I've been doing it since I sort of came in the door. I try to be informative. I try to be plain spoken in how I explain my background and what we're doing as a city and kind of how we're structured. And I do look forward to questions if you have any. So, Sarah, if you can bring up the presentation, we will jump right in. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right. So I have been in Ann Arbor a little over 2 years. I came in October of 2021. I've been in the municipal management business for just under 40 years. It really does go by quickly. My home is Louisville, Kentucky. That's where I grew up, where I got one of my degrees from, and I worked for more than 20 years for the city of Louisville. Went in a middle management position and worked my way to the top administrative post. And the last major project I did working for Louisville was playing a pivotal role in the merger of city-county government. So I left Louisville. I then went to Lexington, Kentucky, which was already a city-county merged government. Worked there in the top administrative role for about 4 years, and then became the city manager of Cincinnati, Ohio, and stayed there for about 8 years. Some of the key things uh, I played a major role in was the development of the waterfront. So if you go to Cincinnati today, there's an area called the Banks that sits between the two stadiums where the Reds and the Bengals play. When I went to Cincinnati in 2006, that was just 18 acres of dirt. And the community had wanted to develop it for years and years and weren't able to do that. And then also the creation of the Cincinnati streetcar system is something that we got done during the time that I worked there. Left Cincinnati and then went to the city of Phoenix. Phoenix is the largest council manager form of government in the United States, and worked there just under 8 years as well. But I was not in the top administrative position there, I was a chief operating officer, or assistant city manager is the title that we used. So if you look at the four cities on the screen, um, Phoenix would be the largest place I've worked. We had, in round numbers, 15,000 employees. And the smallest among the other four would have been Lexington, which at the time when I was there was around 3,200 employees. So I am used to larger organizations. That's sort of been my, um, been where I've spent the bulk of my career. And then, of course, coming to Ann Arbor, and I'll talk a little bit more about our city in one of the upcoming slides. So we can move forward, please. So when you think about the governance of the community, some communities actually have a local constitution, and the constitution forms the government. It determines or speaks to who has what powers within the government. It lays out certain functionality of the government. It talks about um, budgets and elected officials and the terms and all of that. In our city, we don't have a constitution, we have a city charter. And the charter is essentially the document that forms our government. It lays out what the powers of the city administrator are. It lays out the powers of the mayor and the city council. It talks about the different parts of the government. It talks about budgeting and all of that. So whenever we have a question about what is allowed within the government, or if there is a prescriptive way that we have to do certain things, it goes back to what does the charter say? So that can be both good and bad. It's good to have certainty. It's good to have transparency about how you're structured. But the challenge in having a charter is that a lot of cities, when they write the charter, they don't update it with some degree of regularity. And what I'm getting at is some charters were written at a point in time that didn't have certain technological advances sort of baked in. So, as an example, when I worked for the city of Phoenix, at the time the charter was written, it stated that all of the checks that we issued had to be manual checks. So it didn't contemplate the notion of wire transfers. It required that when we do advertising for things, we have to do all of our advertising in print media. So that didn't contemplate the development of the internet, the use of social media. And so some of those things that are baked into a charter that aren't updated causes the local government to behave in sort of an antiquated way. And so you might say, well, why don't you just do something different? Well, if it's in the charter, the only way it can be done differently is if we go back to the people and ask them to vote on updates. And that's not something you can do every year. It's just something that we have to work through. One of the peculiarities in our charter, it refers specifically to this notion of service area administrators. In most other governments, that would be a phrase departments. We don't use the word department here. And while we understand it, and everyone that works here understands the interrelationship between our service areas, it becomes a challenge when we go out to recruit. So if someone left and we go and post a job, and we identify the job as a service area administrator, most of the professionals within the municipal realm don't know what we're talking about. So then we have to kind of explain what it means. Not something that we can't do, but it's just a challenge that we have to kind of work through. So the charter is our Bible, if you will, and the charter is where I look to determine exactly the scope of my job. Next slide, please. So the two primary forms of government are strong mayor and council manager. And Arbor happens to be a council manager form of government. There are a number of council manager forms of government around the country. I'll just sort of tick off a number of cities: Dallas, Las Vegas, San Antonio, Virginia Beach, Kansas City, Clearwater, Savannah, Georgia, Long Beach, Jacksonville, Florida. All of them are council manager forms. Obviously, the one, Phoenix and Cincinnati, on the list that I showed you. So those cities that are council manager have a person like me who works under a contract with the city to provide administrative oversight to the government. If we can go to the next slide, I'll illustrate that point a little finer. So in a strong mayor form of government, my role would be as the chief administrative officer. That means that the mayor is the chief executive. The mayor is the person that signs contracts that determine who gets hired, who runs, who has responsibility for the day-to-day operations of the government. And the mayor is the face of the city. In a council manager form, which is at the bottom of the slide, the person in my role is both the chief executive and the chief administrative officer. Some people use the term interchangeably with council manager as weak mayor. So in our city, under the charter, the city council has two employees, the city administrator and the city attorney. So any attorney that works for the government here works under the city attorney's oversight. And any staff person that works here works under the city administrator. And so when the city council passes ordinances or resolutions, if you ever pay close attention to the wording, when they go through all the whereas clauses and they sort of get to the bottom of, what's this resolution really all about? What is it that you want to see happen? There's always the phrase, the city council directs the city administrator. And the reason that it's written that way is under the charter, the city council does not have any authority over the staff. Only the city administrator has that. So by directing me, it then empowers me to go to whichever area of the government is necessary to carry out the wishes of the policymakers. I, can't tell you which form of government is, better. It depends on what the people of the community want. So you might ask, well, why would a community decide to set their government up in a manner where it's council manager? And there's a couple of reasons for that. Years ago, there was widespread corruption in a number of city governments. And the people in those communities determine the reason they were having those problems is you can elect a person to be mayor, but that doesn't automatically mean they have the skill set or wherewithal to actually run an entire government day to day. And if they happen to be corrupt, then it affects the entire organization. And so, for the communities that have chosen to adopt council manager forms, their view is we would rather have a professionally trained person who's trained in the art of running a city, because we might have a good mayor or we might have a bad mayor. We don't want it to be the luck of the draw. We want to make sure that the people that are leading the day-to-day operations are people that actually have a background in doing that. And then they work in concert with the mayor and the council to move the community forward. The one thing that does not change, regardless of which form of government you have, the mayor is the face of the city, period. Whether you have a council manager form of government or you have a strong mayor, the mayor is the face of the city. So if there's official functions, if there's invitation to the Oval Office, if there's a need to speak for the community in the public realm during times of crisis, you want to hear that mayor's voice. And so everyone knows who the face of the community happens to be. Next slide. So this is a snapshot of the City of Ann Arbor organization. We have roughly 800, 850 employees. We used to have 1,000 employees, but when rough financial times came, the city had to attrit out about 200 folks. And we've been running around this 800, 850 number for some years. I do not foresee a time when the city will be able to go back to 1,000 employees because we simply do not have the tax base to support it. And so we have to make do with that number and work as a team in order to serve the residents of Ann Arbor. We have 7 labor groups, and there's a variety. You've got fire union, there's multiple labor organizations within the police department. We've got some ASME folks that work here, and we're constantly negotiating through collective bargaining to create agreements, and they can span anywhere from 3 to 5 years in length. Our budget, it varies, of course, but in general, it's in the vicinity of $600 million. So just to give you a perspective of the scale of the kind of environments that I've been in, so clearly 800 people is the smallest organization that I've worked for. The Cincinnati budget, by comparison, is around $2.5 billion. When I worked for the city of Phoenix, the budget's a little over $4 billion. So that gives you a glimpse into the magnitude of scale of some of these municipal organizations. We have a independently elected mayor and 10 council people. We have 5 wards. There are 2 council representatives per ward. And the way our city is drawn is a little bit interesting in and of itself. The people that organized our community by design drew the boundaries so that each of the 5 boundaries touch downtown. In a lot of other communities, you will not find that. The downtown will fall into one ward or another. Here, all 5 wards touch it. And the theory behind doing it that way is they wanted to make sure that every elected person realized that they had some level of responsibility to ensuring that the downtown was taken care of, that the downtown got attention, that the downtown was a vibrant area. And by everyone having at least a sliver of it, the theory was that would require that to happen. Our mayor does have a vote. That's not the case in every city. Our mayor also has veto power. That is not the case in every city. But all of the mayoral powers, again, goes back to the city charter. It's laid out there. The mayor here, regardless of who it is, doesn't veto very many things. And there's a notion of, veto override. So the supermajority of people wanted something, even if the mayor didn't want it, there's provisions for making that work. Next slide, please. So when you're talking about the city administrator's office, it would be easy to think about just the 3 or 4 staff people that work directly with me day in and day out. So we have a deputy city administrator, we have a director of operations, we've got other administrative personnel. But as if you look at the city government and think of it in terms of an org chart, an organizational chart, all of these areas are part of the city administrator's office, from the clerk through communications, the finance, fleet, HR, all the way through sustainability and innovations, or OSI as we call it. So when we are preparing the city administrator's budget, all of these entities are incorporated into it. And when we're talking about issues or direction or vision for the city administrator's office, the perspectives of all of these different areas of the organization sort of come into play. So we're a very diverse administrator's office, and we are physically separated into various buildings. Next slide, please. I won't say we're required, but it's smart for us to have a number of strategic relationships. Obviously, this is a college town, so town and gown relationships matter. We interact with the University of Michigan on a wide variety of issues, some big, some small. We interact across various service areas. We also interact at the top. I have ongoing meetings with people in key leadership roles with the university, as does the mayor. It just so happens that I have a personal relationship with Santa Ono, the current president of the university. Coincidentally, when I was the city manager in Cincinnati, he was the president of the University of Cincinnati. So we worked together several years ago, and we're working together again in the Ann Arbor community. And having that kind of relationship and communication is important. And I think it's helpful for the community overall. Ann Arbor Housing Commission, they are not part of city government proper. Some of you have heard or might know Jennifer Hall. Jennifer Hall, for fiscal purposes, a lot of her financial financial elements might flow
Milton, it seems like we might have lost you there. Give me one moment, folks. Milton's going to go ahead and come back on in just one moment, folks. Thank you. Sorry about the interruption, everyone. I am not sure what happened. There's always technical difficulties. But while we're waiting to see if Mr. Dahoney can get back on, I'm just gonna go over a couple more things. We'll take a little break. Um, Always feel free to like just put this on like as like a podcast type of situation. If you like need to eat dinner or anything like that, like please go ahead. Like I said before, kind of how some of the other ones go is that we do allow you to come in as a panelist and kind of interact with the service area administrator, depending just on which one. And that's totally optional. You can always stay as a viewer or you can come on in as a panelist. It just depends on whatever you want to do. I know that I got a couple of questions about the in-person sessions. We do still have a few spots available if anybody did want to still go to any of those. For the in-person sessions that are on Wednesday, which will be the park session, the city clerk session, and then your graduation session. The park session, we have not finalized where we're going to have it. It will either be at Cobblestone or at the Ann Arbor Senior Center. I will be sending out an email to everybody once I can finalize where we're going to be. And then, of course, our city clerk's office, we are going to have it at our new election headquarters. This is out on Manor Road. This is a new place for us. We're very, very excited to have it. And we want to show it to you, share it with you. And then we'll actually also have the graduation there as well. All other sessions will be on Zoom, just like this one. So please feel free to keep on coming every Wednesday. I am going to mute myself momentarily and see if I can get on the phone with Mr. Del.
Well, that was disappointing. Sarah, are you still there?
I sure am.
I don't know what happened.
All good. We just had a little chat about what the rest of the sessions are going to look like. So it worked out for everybody. I'm going to go ahead
Okay.
and share the screen.
Okay, thanks. Sorry for that, folks. Hope you got your popcorn during our little intermission. Okay, so Spark, that is an organization that we contract with to perform certain economic development related functions on behalf of the city. So they would engage with state government when we're talking to companies that are looking at relocating to Washtenaw County. They also do a lot of work with tech startups, do a lot of work with other small businesses on behalf of the city. We give them money annually in order to perform those services. At present, the city government proper, we do not have an economic development office. I'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the coming slides. We do work closely with Ann Arbor Public Schools. As you know, they have an elected school board, just like we have elected members that are policymakers here. Sometimes there are political issues between the institutions. At my level, and I didn't say this when I was describing the role that I play, not only here, but in any city that I work in, I must be an apolitical professional. I don't endorse candidates. I can't do yard signs. I can't attend partisan functions. It doesn't matter to me what affiliation someone has. And it also can't matter to me if my board and their board gets along or doesn't get along. My counterpart would be the superintendent. And I try to have a positive relationship with whoever the superintendent is, regardless of what city I'm in. We've got a relationship with Washtenaw County. The county has a person in the role that I play, and he's referred to as the county administrator. That's Greg Dill. We are both part of the same profession, and so we collaborate back and forth. Most of the time, we are perfectly aligned, and things we're working on are sharing information. There are some instances when the commissioners want something different than the city council members. And so we have to both be professional and represent our organizations, never personal, and simply work through it. When I arrived in Ann Arbor, again, that was in October of 21, this city did not have a federal lobbyist. And with the number of years experience I have in doing this, I know that if you do not have somebody representing your city in DC, you are at a distinct disadvantage. You have got to have someone who's walking the halls of the Capitol that builds relationships with congressional staff, with someone or some entity that can position your city for funding. So we now have a contract with federal lobbyists. We also have state lobbyists. In this case, it happens to be the same firm that does both. But that helps us to position ourselves, to tell our story, to lay out what our needs are, to advocate on behalf of the residents of the city. The red and blue dynamic that you see at the bottom, obviously, depending on who's in the Oval Office, that will have an impact on how we are viewed. Our city clearly is blue and has been for some number of years. I don't remember the last time a Republican was elected to office here. But the other part of that red-blue dynamic is Ann Arbor is not always viewed favorably in Lansing. Um, the state house, changes leadership back and forth. They're in this sort of gray period right now with some shifts. But one of the things I heard about and then I saw firsthand, not everyone in Lansing is necessarily fond of Ann Arbor. We are viewed a certain way, and that can have an impact when you're trying to have success in bringing state dollars back to Ann Arbor in order for us to address some of our needs. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about some internal and external issues because I split my time dealing with both. There are certain internal things that I'll walk through, and there's some external issues that I'll also walk through with you. Next slide, please. So let's start with internal, and I want to begin with organizational stability. In a lot of cities, organizational stability might be taken for granted because they've had a lot of years of continuity. The reality for Ann Arbor is we have had to work through certain periods of instability. So just think about where you work. And if you're retired, just think back to when you were working. If you worked for an organization and you had changes at the top of the organization, four different people in a span of 5 years, you would have a stability issue because the staff is uncertain about what's the vision, what's the direction. It makes it harder to get to know what the city administrator is trying to accomplish if you're constantly playing musical chairs. So we have had a couple of sort of headline grabbing exits of city administrators. And we've also had a lot of change in our HR department. Some of that has been documented as well in the media. So one of the reasons that I was asked to come here was to provide a level of stability for the organization. When I was hired, I initially came into the organization on a 13-month interim contract. So the theory was bring in an outside person, bring in someone that has a lot of experience from multiple places, ask them to do, among other things, stabilize the organization. And hopefully we will be able to sort of move forward from that. So coming here 3 months into my 13-month interim contract, I said to the city council, in order for this to work, given what the recent past has been, if you like the way I'm going about my job, you need to make me permanent right now. Because if the staff are worried that in 13 more months, I'm going to have yet another city administrator, it's going to be very difficult for us to move forward. And so 3 months into my 13-month stint, I was made permanent. And I do intend to be here for a number of years. I'm not looking for another job. I'm not open to considering another job. Uh, so I'm able to say to the staff with a straight face and with all honesty, I am going to be with you, and therefore the vision and direction that I'm trying to get you to buy into is going to be the direction and vision that we have. I'm that helps to stabilize so people know, okay, I get where we're going, I see what we're working on, I can get to know the city administrator and understand how to work with him in this case, and hopefully he can understand us and the way we go about doing our jobs. We're a lean organization, as I indicated. We're going to be stuck at the 850 range for the foreseeable future. We do have some difficulties when it comes to staffing, and it at some level ties into the competitive market. So let me talk a little bit about that. Um, Post COVID, the workplace has fundamentally changed. Well, pre-COVID, everybody showed up at City Hall every day, and there was never a question about it. Post-COVID, a number of people, whether it's the government industry or other industries, have decided to sort of rethink their life. And so now you have more people saying, I'm not willing to go to City Hall 5 days a week. I need to have a remote element to my work if the job can permit it. You know, police and fire, yeah, you got to show up. The people that are working at the water treatment facility, you got to show up. You can't do it remotely. But for a number of positions, in order for us to be a competitive employer, we've had to modify our job descriptions. So we now just tell people this is a position that offers a hybrid work environment. So you're in City Hall X number of days a week, you can work from home. That is attractive when you're trying to get talent. Where the competitive market comes in, uh, we don't necessarily pay the top wages across all of our positions. And so we have lost people, some to other municipalities, some to the private sector, because they simply pay more. So, as an example, um, we're about to lose the person that's over the public services service area. He is a Yale and Stanford educated person. He's highly respected within his industry. He's being hired or has been hired by the private sector and will be leaving us at the end of this month, going to run a water utility at a salary that he would never be able to get if he stayed here. So those are things that we have to work through. The tax structure is limiting. Uh, so the $600 million in round numbers that we have annually to work with, this government is operating basically from three areas. We get a portion of state shared revenue. The bulk of our operating income comes from property tax. And then we also get a share of the marijuana excise tax. When the marijuana money started to flow, there was a theory, not just here, but in other places that permit it, that now we're going to get a windfall of all this money and it's going to help eliminate a lot of our issues. What we have discovered thus far is you had that initial excitement and then the market has sort of stabilized. So we're not seeing this upward trajectory where we're just going to continue to get millions and millions of dollars every year. It's sort of leveled off and essentially it's flat. So here's where some of the uh, sort of the different paradigms of how Ann Arbor is viewed comes into play. We're prohibited from having a local sales tax unless we would subsequently reduce some of the other taxes that we get. So we're sort of locked in. The marijuana sales, I've indicated kind of where that is. We are dependent upon funding from state government. So in a year like this year, where the legislature decided we have a surplus, we're going to share it with cities. Here's $4 or $5 million extra. Well, that's kind of one-time money. The view in Lansing is that Ann Arbor is a wealthy city. I don't dispute that. But there is a fundamental difference between a number of people that live here happen to be wealthy versus the assumption that because of that, our local government is flush with money and should have enough money to do everything it wants. Clearly, that is not the case. And so the limitations of our tax structure impacts our ability. So when the residents want more services, it gets tough because we're struggling with the 600 million to touch all the things that people want touched. And when you only have 800 plus employees, we have certain functions where we might only have 2 or 3 people providing that function for the entire government. So we don't have sufficient backup, and we've got to constantly, work as a team to make sure we can do what's asked of us. Next slide, please. On the external list, some of these things would be issues regardless of what city you're in. We have a homelessness issue here. Ann Arbor, because it is an expensive place to live, we have an affordability issue, both on the housing front and just the ability to live here and participate in the goods and services that are brought to bear. We've been working to try to provide more affordable housing. A number of housing developments that the Housing Commission has done has gone up in downtown. Downtown's the most expensive real estate to build on in virtually any city. So it costs a lot more to put up affordable housing towers in downtown than it would in some other part. But we're working through that. We have public safety issues. We have not had full staffing within the police department during my entire tenure. University relations, sustainability is one of our external issues. We are trying to reduce our carbon footprint. We're working towards our sustainability goals, 2030. Economic growth is something that we're about to change. City Council just passed a series of resolutions this week where they are calling for us to recreate an economic development infrastructure inside the government. So they are asking for us to hire an economic development director. They're asking us to work in more of an organized way on placemaking, on facilitating growth, on creating more opportunities for housing, on being, I won't say more aggressive, because we're not really anywhere at the moment, but they want us to be intentional about land acquisition. And the reason for that, as you probably know, every time the university purchases a piece of real estate, it is no longer tax generating because they are tax exempt. So on the one hand, it's a positive. The university is growing, adding more buildings, hiring more people. That's a plus. But with every parcel that it takes for them to do that, that's less tax revenue that we get, which then causes a strain as we're trying to serve everyone. We need jobs at all levels, not just jobs that people that have masters and PhDs possess. In order for us to work on our affordability initiative, we need to ensure that anyone, regardless of where they are in their career, has an ability to get a job here and hopefully earn a reasonable wage that allows them to live here if they choose to. And then we are working on equity as an external issue, and it's also an internal issue. When I arrived, we did not have a DEI office. We have now created one. It's called the Office of Organizational Equity. We hired a director. That person reports to me. We are trying to address diversity, equity, and inclusion issues throughout the government. And we are also trying to be a community partner as it relates to equity within the community. There's a myriad of other external issues that we have, but this is a handful of things that we expend time on. These are things that we have to work at over time. There's never an ending, or really any of them. It's an ongoing way of life for us, and it just gives you a snapshot of kind of who we are and what we're doing. Next slide, please. Major initiatives. When I arrived, we did not have an infrastructure agenda. We now have one and we update it. And you might say, well, what difference does that make? Well, if you're going to go particularly to DC for dollars, you need to be clear on what you're asking for money for. You need to be clear on what your needs are. And we all need to be speaking with one voice, not multiple voices. So by having an infrastructure agenda, we can say to the federal government, to the various cabinets, here's the needs list for Ann Arbor. Here's how much we need. Here's what we need the money for. And we can, through the use of our lobbyists, work Capitol Hill to bring money back to deal with some of those things. We're implementing a road bond right now. We're about to go into year 3. When I came in the door in 21, the loudest voice I heard from the community was, our streets are terrible. We haven't been keeping up with resurfacing. Can you do something about it? We were able to bond the money instead of spending it as cash. And so now we're resurfacing every construction season over a 36-month period to try to catch up. And catching up is what we are in fact doing. Next slide, please. The Ann Arbor Bicentennial, we are celebrating for the full 12 months of 2024, our 200th birthday. I happen to have the honor of being one of the co-chairs of the Bicentennial Coordinating Committee. That's a group of about 30 people, only maybe 3 or 4 of them are City of Ann Arbor employees. They're mostly volunteers. And so we have a series of activities over the 12 months where we're trying to draw attention to the celebration. We're looking at history. We're also looking forward. We've developed a couple of legacy projects. The new Bicentennial Park, which used to be called Southeast Area Park. We're trying to create a new attraction on the edge of the city that's in a very diverse part of the community. And another legacy project is the renovation of the Elks Lodge, which has a lot of historical significance for the African American community in Ann Arbor. And so those are things that are part of the celebration. We do have a delegation coming here from Germany later in the year as part of the birthday celebration, one of our sister cities. And it's a lot of fun, but it's been a lot of work too. And if you haven't gone to a bicentennial related event, I encourage you to do so, because we do need to kind of come together even more as a community. Next slide, please. So if you were to say, what is the city administrator job in a nutshell? Here's some of the elements that go into what I do. These are things that I have to be involved in all the time. And one of the benefits of getting a person that has experience in the field is a lot of things are intuitive to me at this point. I don't need a lot of direction regarding initiative. I know what it takes to lead a city. One of the things I'm required to do, I go to school every single year. I got to get 40 credits in running cities in order to stay current with my credential. A lot of decision making. And when you have limited staff and limited money, that means a lot of times you're telling people no, so they're not always happy with you. But you do need someone to make decisions on where we're going, providing leadership, understanding the legislative process, both state, federal, and local, fiscal oversight. The budget that gets presented to City Council is my budget, which I'll be doing on April the 15th in a few weeks. And then once council passes it in May, our fiscal year runs July 1 to June 30th. Then I have responsibility for overseeing whatever the budget is that they give the administration, and just a wide plethora of problem solving on a number of things. Next slide, please. These are examples of how we stay engaged and how we help to inform the public. We have a Twitter account. We're on Facebook. We do tweet out. We're on LinkedIn. We have an ordinance that requires public engagement. We have 2 meetings a month with the city council, and I think we have about 60 plus boards and commissions, which provides opportunities for people to participate in their local government. The bicentennial, as I mentioned, if you want more information about the bicentennial, about activities that are taking place, if you want to get bicentennial memorabilia, whole host of things, you can go to that particular website. Let me take a quick glance at my notes to make sure I have touched everything I wanted to with you. Just as an aside, so next week I'm going to be going to Boston for a conference on artificial intelligence. I am a member of an organization called ICMA, the International City County Management Association. There are some 23 different countries that have city managers. There's, in round numbers, about 12,000 city managers worldwide. So when you think of ICMA, think of it the way you would think about the American Bar Association for attorneys. So ICMA is who provides the code of ethics that I have to follow. ICMA is the entity that says we can't do politics, but it is also the entity that educates us on how to manage cities. And so this conference is introducing city managers to the possibilities of how AI can be used within a municipal government environment. So we're not going to be hiring hundreds of people. Then you need to find technology that can help us be more efficient, that can help us stretch, that can help us cover more ground. So I'm going to see what's possible. Next slide, please. And that brings us to what's on your mind. And it doesn't look like there's any questions. Am I right about that, Sarah?
So far none, but please go ahead and put some questions in the chat. We're here to answer them.
So if you have questions, bring them forward. I'd love to try to respond to them if I can. And again, I'm really appreciative that our number is up to 20 participants. There's so many people that are taking the time to learn more about the Ann Arbor government. I think that's good for the community, certainly good for you, and good for us too. Okay. Let's see. Do our federal lobbyists ever visit the city? Yes. They come through a couple of times a year. They have an office based in Lansing. So we communicate a lot with them. Um, we will do a legislative breakfast annually where we will invite the delegation from Lansing to come here. So those are our state senators and our representatives. And so we share with them our infrastructure agenda. We share with them uh, what policy items are important to the city so they know how to speak for us in Lansing. And sometimes we're moving towards having a Ann Arbor Day in DC. A lot of bigger cities do that, where you will go and visit all of your federal reps and make sure they know what you need back home. So that's something that we're doing. What do you perceive to be the main difference in managing a larger versus a small city like Ann Arbor? It's getting used to scale, for one. So you have, in a place like Phoenix, you've got 500 plus square miles, and that's just the city limits. So the city population there is 1.7 million people. You do work on a lot of things in bigger places that you don't necessarily get to do in smaller places. So, for example, I've helped to organize a Super Bowl, a Final Four, those kind of things. Obviously, in a bigger place, the crime is a lot more pronounced than it is here. But the issues are the issues. The real difference is the scale. There's homelessness here, there's homelessness in bigger places. There's bigotry here, there's bigotry in other places. There's a need for all kinds of jobs, both here and other places. So the issues will be the bread and butter issues will be the same, but the scale will be different. Some of it will vary depending upon geography. Here's what I mean. In Ann Arbor, we have water. We're not really concerned about running out of water. Arizona is the desert. There is a concern about running out of water in a place like that. What collaborative effort is the city engaged with as it relates to Washtenaw County? So we work jointly with the county on things like funding nonprofits, on collaborating with the Housing Commission and others on eviction prevention. We do a lot of collaborating around public health issues. When COVID was raging, there was a lot of collaboration around how to address that as a total community. There's limited interaction around economic development, but there is some. And then there's collaboration with them on legislative things. Sometimes the university, the county, and the city all want or support the same thing in Lansing or DC, and where our interests align, then you collaborate on those. Are any of the city administrator office jobs elected positions? No. The only elected people are mayor and the council members. In some cities, the clerk is an elected position, not here. That's a staff function. And so all of the 800 folks are hired through a regular hiring process. Can you talk a little more about options for expanding the tax base? Any thoughts on a city income tax? What would it take to institute a city sales tax? Reducing property taxes? Question mark. Yeah, see, that's the thing. Because of the Headley Amendment, the way it's structured, so yeah, you can go and add a sales tax, but you then need to reduce your property tax. Um, so if you were to do that, but your net gain in income and revenue, not income, if your net gain in revenue stays the same, we stay sort of locked in this position. I have been outspoken, which coincidentally has led to me catching a lot of flack. A year ago, I was open about the fact that we need to be more focused on generating revenue. And when I said that, and I focused on the Klein lot, you all know how that turned out. It didn't end well. But the reason that I did it is because the Klein lot is a $17 million piece of real estate that the city owns. And we're using it to park 140 cars. And we only get 20% of the revenue from the parking. So when you're in a situation where you need more revenue to run the place and to enhance our city services, you have to be intentional about revenue. The other thing that the resolutions that the city council just passed on Monday, how they relate to it, we currently don't do anything to proactively go after real estate that's on the market. So we just watch it. And if the university buys it, we're sort of just stuck. Well, we're going to change that and try to get in a position to have a fund that allows us to go and acquire real estate. So if we're opportunistic and we acquire real estate, we can then sell it to tax generating users and help grow our tax base instead of just bemoaning the fact that the university bought it or the school system bought it or a nonprofit bought it. But we also need some changes in Lansing, and that's kind of beyond my pay grade. That will take a lot of lobbying from a lot of places other than Ann Arbor, because again, we're not always viewed favorably in Lansing. So if Ann Arbor's the only city asking for it, there's not a chance that's going to happen. We need more folks. Somebody's thanking me for the presentation. I appreciate it. And let's see, how do you manage workload generated by resolutions coming from city council versus existing work? That is a great question. It is a challenge. You've got to constantly be able to sort of balance competing interests. And what works for me is, having done this for so long, I'm able to compartmentalize things. So I can be in the moment in whatever I'm working on and have 20 other things that's in their own little compartment and not be sort of overwhelmed with it. So when you have been in the business for this many years, you develop an ability to determine which things I need to actually be doing myself or which things I need to delegate, which things I need to seek partnerships with other organizations. The key thing that helps me be successful is I do have an ability to communicate to people, even on complex topics. I am big on storytelling. I'm always talking to our staff about that. If people don't understand what we need, if people don't understand what we're working on, if you can't make people understand where we're going, then we're not going to be able to galvanize the community to line up and give their support. And so we have to embrace things like social media, which local governments have been slow to do. We've got to be able to speak across multiple platforms because people aren't reading papers and they're not getting their news from whichever station you watch for news. You know, it's multiple ways that we have to be able to do the job. And environmental sustainability, on environmental sustainability, is the city considering the new U.S. Treasury IRS direct pay program to augment funding for carbon neutrality? We are looking at that and everything else under the sun that can bring us money to help us advance towards our A20 goals for 2030. We're looking at a number of initiatives. We've got millions of dollars in ask for state and federal funding to allow us to do what we're trying to do. Now, when I say this, I'm coming at you from an apolitical lane. The outcome of the November election will matter. But I would say that regardless of who the candidates were, because the federal policy, is it favorable towards cities or not? Is it a federal policy making that allows us to work with it? Um, that's an important outcome, regardless of who the president is. So we're following that. What is the general relationship between Ann Arbor City Administration and Ypsilanti City Administration? I have swapped emails with the Ypsilanti city manager. I've never met him. I don't really have a relationship with him. It's not something that I think either one of us are opposed to. We just haven't made that happen. And our two governments communicate, but the communities are pretty different, and our goals are not necessarily their goals, and vice versa. Um, and then we do have the mutual aid relationship. So if they had a raging fire and they needed us, we would be there. A number of communities around us, we have a reciprocal relationship with. If we needed them, they would be here. That's just kind of how we work. If you had to cut departments or services to balance the budget or avoid increasing taxes, where would you look to trimming down? That is extremely difficult because think about it this way: everything we do, somebody wants it or it wouldn't exist. Everything we do. And when the government went from 1,000 to 800, there's this constant demand. So let's take something that we just experienced this season. The public has said to us, why don't you do a better job at clearing snow? And the answer is we only have a very limited staff available to clear snow. And so when the snow incident stretches out for days, our primary responsibility is to get the major arteries open. And when we get them open, but either it freezes or more snow comes, that means we have to go back over. You've got to have access to your hospitals. You've got to have access for connectivity to certain parts of your city. That is an absolute must. Well, when you have huge staffs, you can be all over the major arteries and in the neighborhoods at the same time. Here, we're getting to the neighborhoods after we've handled primary. Um, if I were going to cut something, there would be, I would really have to look at the impact of what the cut would mean. So if you were in a serious budget deficit, the areas that governments tend to look at, parks, you, in the purest sense, you would say that's not necessarily a bread and butter day-to-day issue. But if you were to cut parks, people would be outraged in Ann Arbor because parks is something that has a lot of public support. And cutting services means cutting people. So now I'm going to go from 800 people to 700 people, and no one's going to be happy. We can't cut fire service because we're not at full strength. Politically, people might tell you we could cut police. We're not at full strength there. And professionally, I would tell you we really can't do it. So it'll be tough in a few years where we have a projected deficit. I may have to actually answer that question in a real manner, and we'll see. How do cities share learnings and developments so that we can benefit from each other? Issues like AI, sustainability, economic development. There's a number of ways. Universities tend to put on classes or seminars that a lot of people can go to. There are professional organizations like the one I belong to, but there are plenty of other organizations. There's a lot of online learning opportunities where you can learn about sustainability, where you can learn about economic development. One of the things that COVID took away from us, no one was doing conferences or conventions because you couldn't be in the same physical space. And I will tell you that if you're only doing all of your learning online, you're missing a great part of it because the online learning doesn't always give you opportunities to learn from peers. You're listening to a presenter, you see people on the screen, you can't really talk to them. Being able to, now that we're living with COVID, and go back and meet people so I can ask other cities around the country, hey, how'd you do that? Or what was the problem you had with working on that? And so that goes on. Sharing information is something that you really need to be comfortable with. Um, is there any legislation regulating the amount of property a university college can purchase from a city? No. The university is exempt from city rules, period. They can purchase anything that they want. And so if I were to point to a single action that changed the trajectory of Ann Arbor, it happened before I got here, but the largest tax generating entity in the city was Pfizer. And when the university purchased the Pfizer property when they left town, it caused a major drop in the city. So the university holdings of real estate cost the city $2.4 million annually. So that's money we would have had, but do not have. Is it a bad thing? It just is. The university's doing what it does, and the city needs to do a better job of fighting for itself. What's the most fun part of your job, or what is an accomplishment you want to be sure we know? The most fun part's the variety of it. No 2 days are alike. If you ever watched the television show, it was on some years ago, West Wing. So the similarity between West Wing and any local government is that daily chaos. So I have a schedule. When you do what I do, you can't make your own schedule. If I try to do that, I would get in trouble. So someone has to manage who sees me and when do they see me and for how much time do they get. And no matter what that schedule says for any day or any week, I can tell you with certainty the schedule is not going to unfold the way it's written up. Something's going to happen where somebody's got to have 15 minutes. There's a phone call you got to take. We just got an inquiry from the governor's office this week, as an example, with 48 hours, 72 hours notice. We were told a cabinet secretary from DC is going to be here tomorrow. She wants to go here. She wants to go there. Can you help? Um, a storm is coming. And so we're without power for X number of days. And so when you see all these things that happen around the country, all of that stuff, it just has a lot of variety to it. That's what I like. I am comfortable in making difficult decisions, but I will share something with you. And part of that, I guess, comes with experience/wisdom. Early in my career, I would have been that 70-hour guy. I would have taken it home. I would have worked all weekends. I would miss a lot of family stuff. I don't do that now. Uh, my wife's time is my wife's time. And unless it's an emergency, I'm not interrupting it. My kids are grown. I've got grandchildren in Louisville. Um, my mental health is important. If I am healthy physically and mentally, I can do a better job for you. So that means I have to maintain that work-life balance that is hard to do. My job's 24/7. Cool, I signed up for that. But to say I'm going to give every waking hour to it only means I'm going to burn out or, crash and burn. And that's not good for the city and it's not good for me. If What would it take to introduce a sales tax that is not revenue neutral? Help in Lansing. What is the process to change the city charter? Is that a necessary step? To change the city charter requires a vote of the people. So the city would have to determine what part of the charter do we want changed. The city council would have to approve the language that's going on the ballot talking about the change. And it would be on a city ballot during an election. Now, the greatest turnout for elections is always in a presidential year. So if you want to get the biggest turnout, you go on November of whenever the president's running, because everybody's coming out for that. And people tend to, in Ann Arbor, we're the most educated city in the United States. People are engaged here. They know what issues are. But, as our time winds down, and since my style is always to be candid with people, and I wasn't here when it happened, I'm going to give you an example of how wording matters. Our community is split still over center of the city. It went on the ballot. Some people thought it meant there's going to be a certain kind of park created in the center of the city. Other people thought it meant something different. So here we sit, I don't know, 6 years later, there's no park. There's controversy around it. There's a difference of opinion over what some people want X and some people want Y. And, I don't have any emotional skin in the game. I listen to what people say. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, I read it, but I didn't really understand what the language meant. I thought it was going to be this, and then now it's not that. So the reason I'm bringing that up, charter changes have to be done very intentionally and they have to have high level clarity. People need to be crystal clear on what does this language mean. If I vote yes, does that mean I support it? If I vote no, does that mean I'm against it? Sometimes the language of the ballot initiative can be such that no means yes and yes means no. And I've seen that play out. So complicated, but so is democracy. Sarah, what else can I do for you? Will you help hire the new economic development director? If the city council approves it and if I put it in the budget, yes, because the person will report to me. So I haven't rolled out my budget yet. That'll happen April 15th. And I didn't say this, but this will make more sense to you. Resolutions are not the force of law like ordinances. So you can tell me you want me to create an economic development office, but if my conclusion is we can't afford that unless we cut something, then it might not happen. Um, Thank you all very much for your time. What time is it? I'm in Arizona, so it's 5 o'clock my time, 8 o'clock your time. This
8 o'clock our time.
3 hour difference is crazy. But I'm in Phoenix because I'm going to the Final Four. I got tickets through the NCAA lottery thing. And so, I don't have a team in it. My team didn't even make the tournament, but I'm a fanatic for basketball. So I will be losing my voice on Saturday and Monday. And then Tuesday, I'll fly to Boston to learn about AI. And then when I come back, I'll figure out how to use artificial intelligence to do this presentation. And I can take the night off. All
And then
right, Sarah, we good?
you're gonna come back and do the budget meeting. So
Yes. Yeah.
all righty. Thank you so much, Milton. I really, really appreciate it. That's all that we have for tonight, folks. Thank you all for being so engaging and all the wonderful questions. We will see you all next week.
Bye bye.
Bye.